The first time I saw a human, I thought they were the most pathetic species to ever crawl out of their home system. Standing barely 2 meters tall with their soft pink skin and fragile bones, they looked like children playing dress-up in military uniforms. This was during the Galactic Council's emergency session on Kepler Station, where we were deciding the fate of their recently discovered world. I am Zexthar, Chief Military Advisor to the Vraxian Empire, and I have witnessed the rise and fall of 17 civilizations. My species has ruled the Outer Rim for 3,000 cycles, our chitinous armor and plasma-resistant hide making us the apex predators of known space. When the humans requested membership in the Galactic Council, most of us saw it as a formality before inevitable absorption into one of the major empires. The human delegation consisted of 5 individuals, led by someone they called Admiral Sarah Chen. She wore a simple blue uniform with small metal decorations, nothing like the ceremonial battle armor worn by proper warriors. Her hair was tied back in what seemed like an afterthought, and she carried no visible weapons. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "Honored council members," she began, her words translated through our neural implants. "Humanity seeks peaceful coexistence and mutual prosperity among the stars." The Chlorthian representative, Ambassador Grixtel, literally roared with laughter. His massive frame shook the floor plating as he stood, all 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of mockery. "Little meat creatures think they belong among warriors. Your entire species would make decent livestock, nothing more." I watched Admiral Chen's face during this insult. Most species would have shown rage, fear, or submission. Humans, I learned later, have something far more dangerous than any of these emotions. They have patience. "We understand your concerns about our physical capabilities," she replied calmly. "Perhaps we could demonstrate our potential contributions through a joint military exercise." The suggestion sent ripples of amusement through the council chamber. The Chlorthians were renowned for their battle prowess, standing 3 meters tall with natural bone armor and retractable claws. They had conquered 47 systems through pure military might. The idea that humans could offer them anything useful in combat was absurd. Ambassador Grixtel's eyes glowed with predatory delight. "Very well, meat creature. We will conduct naval maneuvers in the Titan Nebula next cycle. Bring your best ships and warriors. When you fail spectacularly, your species will accept servant status under Chlorthian protection." Admiral Chen nodded once. "Agreed, we'll bring 3 ships and a full crew complement." 3 ships? The Chlorthians would be bringing 30 vessels, including their flagship dreadnought Bone Crusher Asterisk. Each Chlorthian warship was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons that could crack planetary surfaces. I had seen them reduce entire rebel fleets to cosmic dust without breaking formation. As the human delegation filed out, I found myself studying their movements. They walked with an odd rhythm, not the proud swagger of warriors or the hurried shuffle of prey animals. There was something else there, something I couldn't identify at the time. Now I know it was the walk of creatures who had spent millions of years hunting things much larger and more dangerous than themselves. The next few cycles passed quickly as both fleets prepared for the demonstration. Intelligence reports on human military capabilities were sparse and contradictory. They had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel, and their weapons technology seemed primitive by galactic standards. Their ships were small, built from basic metal alloys rather than the bioengineered materials favored by advanced civilizations. Most concerning was their apparent lack of proper command structure. Human military units seemed to operate with minimal hierarchy, allowing low-ranking soldiers to make tactical decisions that should be reserved for senior officers. This chaos would surely lead to their rapid defeat against Chlorthian discipline. I decided to observe the exercise personally, bringing my own vessel to the Titan Nebula. The nebula was chosen specifically because its dense gas clouds and electromagnetic interference would favor the Chlorthians' close-range combat doctrine while hampering long-distance coordination. When I arrived at the designated coordinates, the Chlorthian fleet was already in position. 30 massive warships arranged in perfect battle formation, their hulls gleaming like polished bone under the nebula's strange light. Admiral Threcker commanded from the bridge of Bone Crusher Asterisk, his confidence radiating across all communication channels. "Where are the meat creatures?" he growled into the fleet-wide comm. "Are they too frightened to face true warriors?" That's when the humans arrived, and I got my first real look at their ships. Three vessels materialized at the edge of sensor range, so small they barely registered on our detection systems. The largest couldn't have been more than 200 meters long, tiny compared to the kilometer-long Clorthian dreadnoughts. But something was wrong with the way they moved. Human ships don't lumber through space like the massive vessels of other species. They dart and weave like predatory fish, their engines producing thrust vectors that seem to defy conventional physics. As I watched, the lead ship performed a maneuver that should have torn it apart under gravitational stress, spinning end over end while maintaining forward momentum. Beginning exercise parameters, Admiral Chen's voice crackled across all frequencies. Rules of engagement are non-lethal weapons only. First side to disable opponent's flagship wins. Admiral Threcker's laughter boomed through space. Agreed, little ones, try not to die too quickly. The Clorthian fleet began its advance, maintaining tight formation as they moved deeper into the nebula. Their strategy was simple and effective. Use their superior firepower and armor to overwhelm the humans through direct assault. It had worked against every opponent they had ever faced. The human ships scattered immediately, disappearing into the dense gas clouds like they had never existed. For several minutes, the Clorthian sensors found nothing but electromagnetic ghosts and sensor shadows. Admiral Threcker ordered his fleet to spread out, attempting to flush the humans from their hiding places. That was their first mistake. The attack came from everywhere and nowhere. Human ships emerged from the nebula's interference like vengeful spirits, striking with surgical precision before vanishing again. Their weapons were indeed primitive by galactic standards, simple kinetic projectiles and basic energy beams, but they used them with a level of accuracy that defied belief. I watched in fascination as one human vessel, no larger than a Clorthian shuttle, crippled a heavy cruiser with a single perfectly placed shot to its main reactor coupling. The human ship was gone before the cruiser's weapons could even track its position. "Impossible," Admiral Threcker roared. "They're using some kind of cloaking technology." But I was monitoring the sensor feeds from multiple ships, and I could see the truth. The humans weren't invisible. They were simply better at using the environment than anyone thought possible. They moved through electromagnetic interference like they were born in it, timing their attacks to coincide with natural sensor blind spots. More concerning was their coordination. Despite having only 3 ships scattered across hundreds of cubic kilometers, they fought as a single organism. When one ship engaged a target, the other 2 were already positioning for follow-up strikes or covering retreats. Their seemingly chaotic command structure was actually a form of organization so advanced that it looked like chaos to more rigid military minds. Within an hour, the Clorthian fleet had lost 12 ships to various forms of mission-kill damage. None were destroyed, per the exercise rules, but all were effectively removed from combat. The humans hadn't lost a single vessel, though sensor readings suggested they were taking damage from near misses and debris impacts. Admiral Threcker finally lost his composure completely. "All ships, ignore formation protocols, hunt them down individually." It was exactly what the humans were waiting for. The moment the Clorthian fleet broke formation, the human ships struck like a pack of coordinated predators. They had been hurting their opponents all along, using hit-and-run tactics to frustrate and anger the Clorthians into making tactical errors. The largest human ship, which had been conspicuously absent from most of the fighting, suddenly appeared directly behind Bone Crusher Asterisk. I realized with growing amazement that they had been using the Dreadnought's own massive sensor shadow as concealment, staying in its blind spot while the other ships created diversions. What happened next changed my understanding of warfare forever. The human ship didn't attack Bone Crusher with weapons. Instead, it deployed what appeared to be simple magnetic grapples, attaching itself to the Dreadnought's hull like a parasite. Before Admiral Threcker could react, the human vessel began transmitting some kind of electronic warfare signal directly through the hull connection. Bone Crusher's Asterisk systems began shutting down one by one. Navigation, weapons, communications, even life support flickered and died as the human virus spread through the ship's computer networks. Within minutes, the most powerful warship in the Clorthian fleet was dead in space. "Exercise concluded," Admiral Chen announced calmly. "Clorthian flagship disabled, human forces maintain full operational capacity." The silence that followed was deafening. In less than 2 hours, 3 small human ships had defeated a fleet 30 times their size, using tactics that none of us had ever seen before. They combined technological innovation with strategic thinking in ways that challenged everything we thought we knew about space combat. As the human ships prepared to depart, Admiral Chen opened a direct communication channel to my vessel. Her image appeared on my display, and for the first time, I really looked at a human face. What I saw there wasn't the primitive aggression of a young species or the cold calculation of an advanced civilization. What I saw was the patient confidence of apex predators who had learned to hunt in packs, who could outthink their prey as easily as they could outfight them. Humanity, I realized, wasn't just another species seeking membership in the galactic community. They were something entirely new. The aftermath of the Titan Nebula exercise sent shockwaves through the galactic political establishment. Within cycles, every major power was reassessing their intelligence on humanity and quietly upgrading their threat evaluation protocols. The Chlorthian Empire, humiliated by their public defeat, withdrew from several joint military ventures and began a massive overhaul of their fleet tactics. I found myself obsessed with understanding what I had witnessed. How had a species that had barely mastered interstellar travel managed to outfight one of the galaxy's premier military forces? The answer, I suspected, lay not in their technology, but in something far more fundamental. My first real insight came during a cultural exchange program that Admiral Chen proposed to the Galactic Council. Rather than the usual diplomatic tour and trade negotiations, she suggested that selected council members visit Earth to observe human society directly. Most species dismissed this as an irrelevant waste of time, but I volunteered immediately. The journey to Earth took 12 standard cycles, giving me time to study the intelligence files we had gathered on human civilization. What I found was both fascinating and disturbing. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history in a state of constant warfare, not just with other species, but with each other. Their homeworld was a death trap of natural disasters, predators, diseases, and environmental extremes that should have driven any sensible species to extinction. Instead, humanity had thrived. Their planet orbited a volatile star that regularly bombarded the surface with deadly radiation. The continental masses shifted constantly, creating earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis. Weather patterns could change from life-giving rain to catastrophic storms without warning. Most terrifying of all, Earth was regularly struck by massive asteroids that had caused multiple extinction events. Any rational species would have developed advanced technology to escape such a hostile environment. Humans had instead adapted to thrive in chaos itself. When I finally arrived at Earth, Admiral Chen met me at their primary spaceport with a small escort of human soldiers. I was expecting to be taken directly to their government centers or military installations. Instead, she brought me to something she called a school. "If you want to understand humanity," she explained as we walked through corridors filled with young humans, "you need to see how we prepare our children for the world." The facility was unlike any educational institution I had encountered. Rather than the orderly training centers used by civilized species, human schools seemed designed to simulate controlled chaos. Young humans were divided into age groups and subjected to a bewildering variety of challenges that seemed to serve no obvious purpose. In one area, children barely old enough to walk were encouraged to climb elaborate structures made of metal and wood. They fell repeatedly, sometimes crying briefly before attempting the same climb again. When I asked about this apparent cruelty, Admiral Chen smiled. "We call it a playground," she said. "Children learn to assess risk, overcome fear, and develop physical coordination. More importantly, they learn that failure is temporary and success requires persistence." In another section, slightly older humans were engaged in competitive games that involved complex rules, teamwork, and strategic thinking. What struck me most was how quickly they adapted when the rules changed or when their teammates were replaced. They seemed to instinctively understand that rigid planning was less valuable than the ability to improvise. The most revealing moment came when we observed a group of adolescent humans participating in something called debate class. 2 teams were assigned opposite sides of a complex ethical question and required to argue their positions using logic and evidence. Halfway through the exercise, the instructor suddenly switched the teams, forcing each group to argue the position they had just been opposing. Without missing a beat, The young humans adapted to their new roles and began constructing equally compelling arguments for the opposite viewpoint. They showed no confusion or resentment at the sudden change. If anything, they seemed to find the challenge energizing. Cognitive flexibility, Admiral Chen explained when I asked about this strange practice. We teach our children that truth is complex and that the ability to understand multiple perspectives is more valuable than dogmatic certainty. That evening, Admiral Chen brought me to her family home for what humans call dinner. The casual nature of this invitation shocked me. Among my people, bringing an alien into one's private residence would require months of security preparations and formal protocols. Admiral Chen's family consisted of her spouse, 2 children, and her elderly mother. What fascinated me was how they interacted during the meal. Rather than the hierarchical communication patterns used by most species, human families engaged in what could only be described as controlled chaos. Everyone spoke at once, interrupted each other freely, and shifted between topics with bewildering speed. Yet underneath this apparent disorder was a sophisticated form of social coordination. Each family member somehow managed to communicate their thoughts while simultaneously processing input from all the others. The children, barely into adolescence, were encouraged to disagree with their parents and present alternative viewpoints on various subjects. When Admiral Chen's teenage daughter criticized a recent military policy decision, the admiral listened carefully and asked probing questions rather than asserting parental authority. "How do you maintain discipline with such permissive child-rearing practices?" I asked during a private moment with Admiral Chen. Her answer revealed another layer of human complexity. "We don't control our children through fear or rigid hierarchy," she explained. "Instead, we teach them to think independently while understanding the consequences of their choices. A human who can only follow orders is useless in real combat situations." This philosophy extended throughout human society. During my tour of their military installations, I observed training exercises that emphasized individual initiative within group coordination. Human soldiers were expected to make split-second tactical decisions without consulting higher authority, then seamlessly integrate those decisions with their unit's overall strategy. Their equipment reflected this approach. Human weapons and vehicles were designed for adaptability rather than specialized optimization. A single human soldier carried tools that could function as weapons, communication devices, medical equipment, and engineering implements depending on the situation. Most remarkable was their approach to leadership. Human military units operated under what they called mission command, where senior officers provided overall objectives but allowed subordinates complete freedom in choosing methods. This created a military force that could continue functioning even when communication was disrupted or command structures were damaged. The implications were staggering. Most galactic militaries relied on centralized control and specialized roles. Destroy the command ship or disrupt communications, and entire fleets would become helpless. Human forces, by contrast, became more dangerous when isolated because individual units could operate independently while maintaining strategic coherence. But the real revelation came during my visit to a human historical museum. Admiral Chen guided me through exhibits documenting their species' long journey from primitive hunters to spacefaring civilization. What I saw there challenged everything I thought I knew about natural selection and evolutionary development. Humanity had not evolved on a peaceful garden world like most intelligent species. Earth was a planetary-scale battleground where success required constant adaptation to changing threats. Their ancestors had survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and countless other catastrophes that would have wiped out more specialized species. More disturbing was their history of warfare against each other. Human civilization was built on a foundation of constant conflict, with different groups developing increasingly sophisticated methods of violence. Their technological progress was driven primarily by military necessity rather than peaceful exploration. "We learned early that cooperation and competition are not opposites," Admiral Chen explained as we stood before a display of human weapons throughout history. "Our greatest advances came when different groups shared knowledge while simultaneously trying to overcome each other. Conflict drives innovation, but only if the participants are roughly equal in capability." This explained the humans' seemingly contradictory nature. They could cooperate seamlessly with former enemies while maintaining readiness for renewed conflict. Their diplomatic corps was staffed largely by former military officers who understood that peace was simply warfare conducted through other means. The museum's final exhibit was dedicated to humanity's recent expansion into space. Unlike other species, who had ventured beyond their homeworld to escape environmental limitations or seek resources, humans seem to view space exploration as simply another form of territorial expansion. They weren't fleeing Earth's dangers. They were bringing Earth's competitive intensity to the rest of the galaxy. As my visit neared its end, Admiral Chen arranged for me to observe a human military exercise on Earth's surface. This wasn't a formal demonstration like the Titan Nebula engagement, but a routine training operation designed to maintain unit readiness. The scenario involved a simulated planetary invasion where human forces had to defend critical infrastructure against a technologically superior enemy. What I witnessed defied every principle of conventional military wisdom. Rather than concentrating their forces for maximum firepower, human units spread across the entire combat zone and operated independently. They used the planet's natural features as weapons, triggering avalanches and redirecting rivers to channel enemy movements. When their equipment was damaged or destroyed, they improvised replacements using local materials. Most importantly, they refused to accept defeat even when facing impossible odds. Individual soldiers would continue fighting long after any rational being would have surrendered, often achieving tactical victories through sheer persistence and creative thinking. "We have a saying," Admiral Chen told me as we watched a squad of human soldiers defeat a simulated armored division using nothing but demolition charges and careful timing. "Humans don't lose wars. We just run out of time or decide the objective isn't worth the cost." The exercise concluded with what humans called an after-action review, where participants analyzed their performance and identified areas for improvement. What struck me was the brutal honesty of these discussions. Soldiers criticized their own officers freely, pointing out tactical errors and suggesting alternative approaches. Rather than being offended by such insubordination, the officers encouraged even harsher criticism. They seemed to understand that military effectiveness required constant adaptation, and adaptation required the honest assessment of failure. That night, as I prepared for my departure from Earth, I finally understood what made humanity so dangerous. They weren't more advanced than other galactic civilizations, nor were they particularly stronger or faster than existing species. What made humans terrifying was their fundamental relationship with conflict itself. Where other species viewed warfare as an unfortunate necessity or a tool for achieving specific objectives, humans treated conflict as a natural environment in which they had evolved to thrive. They didn't just fight wars, they lived them every day in every aspect of their society. Their entire civilization was a military exercise disguised as peaceful coexistence. And now they were loose in the galaxy, bringing their chaotic innovation and predatory cooperation to civilizations that had grown soft through millennia of ordered peace. My report to the Vraxian High Command after returning from Earth sparked the most intense strategic debate in our empire's history. The implications of what I had observed went far beyond simple military considerations. Humanity represented a fundamental challenge to the galactic order that had maintained relative peace for over 2 millennia. Within cycles of my briefing, emergency sessions were convened across all major civilizations. The crystalline hegemony demanded immediate action to contain the human threat. The botanical collective proposed diplomatic isolation until humanity could be properly civilized. Even the normally peaceful Aquatic Federation began quietly upgrading their defensive systems. But it was the ancient Eternals who provided the most disturbing perspective on the human situation. The Eternals were the oldest spacefaring civilization in known space, having achieved interstellar travel when most current species were still developing basic tools. Their representatives rarely spoke during council sessions, preferring to observe with the patience that came from having witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. When Elder Terminus finally addressed the emergency assembly, his words sent chills through every delegate present. "We have encountered this pattern before," the ancient being communicated through crystalline harmonics that bypassed normal translation protocols. Twice in our recorded history, young species with similar characteristics have emerged from hostile worlds to challenge galactic stability. The assembly hall fell silent. The Eternal's historical records stretched back 50,000 standard years, encompassing periods that most civilizations remembered only in mythological fragments. The first occurrence was 37,000 cycles ago. A species called the Devourers arose from a world of constant predation. Like humans, they adapted to thrive in conflict and carried that adaptability into space. They conquered 43 star systems before we developed countermeasures. Elder Terminus paused, his crystalline form shifting to deeper shades of blue that indicated profound concern. The second occurrence was 18,000 cycles ago. The swarm queens emerged from a planet racked by perpetual geological instability. They too demonstrated the dangerous combination of adaptability and aggressive expansion that we now observe in humanity. Ambassador Grixtel, still smarting from his fleet's humiliation in the Titan Nebula, leaned forward eagerly. What happened to these previous threats? How were they defeated? The Elder's response was not what anyone expected. They were not defeated, they transcended. The implications of this statement took several moments to fully register. Transcendence, in galactic terms, referred to the theoretical state where a civilization evolved beyond the need for physical existence, moving into higher dimensional planes that were inaccessible to normal spacetime. Both species eventually developed technologies and philosophies so advanced that they chose to abandon material existence entirely. Before their transcendence, however, each transformed the galaxy in profound ways. The Devourer's innovations in biological manipulation formed the foundation for modern medical science. The Swarm Queen's discoveries in quantum mechanics enabled the faster-than-light travel that all current civilizations use. Elder Terminus's form shifted to alarming shades of red. But the period of their emergence was characterized by unprecedented warfare, social upheaval, and the extinction of dozens of less adaptable species. The galaxy required millennia to recover from each transcendence event. The chamber erupted in panicked discussion. The idea that humanity might follow the same pattern was terrifying enough, but the collateral damage predicted by the Eternal's historical precedent was unacceptable to civilizations that had grown comfortable with stable, predictable existence. It was during this chaos that Admiral Chen requested permission to address the assembly. Her timing was either incredibly bold or remarkably stupid. The galactic mood was decidedly hostile toward humanity at the moment. She entered the chamber alone, wearing the same simple uniform I had first seen cycles ago. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the agitated representatives surrounding her. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the vast space without any apparent amplification. Honored delegates, I understand your concerns about my species' intentions and capabilities. I'm here to propose a solution that addresses these concerns while preventing the tragic outcomes described by Elder Terminus. Ambassador Grixtel stood immediately, his massive form radiating hostility. The only solution is immediate containment. Your species must be confined to your home system before you can spread your chaos throughout civilized space. Admiral Chen turned toward him with what I was beginning to recognize as characteristic human patience. Ambassador, your own military forces recently discovered the limitations of containment strategies. Perhaps a different approach would be more productive. The subtle reminder of his fleet's defeat sent waves of anger through the Clorthian delegation, but Admiral Chen continued before they could respond. I propose that humanity be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council with specific restrictions and responsibilities. We will limit our expansion to designated sectors and submit our military developments to joint oversight committees. In exchange, we offer our unique capabilities in service of galactic stability. The proposal seemed reasonable on the surface, but I had spent enough time studying human communication patterns to recognize the layers of meaning beneath her words. She wasn't really offering restriction. She was negotiating the terms of humanity's integration into galactic affairs. Elder Terminus resonated with harmonics that indicated deep consideration. What specific capabilities do you believe humanity can contribute to galactic civilization? Admiral Chen's answer revealed the true depth of human strategic thinking. Crisis response, she said simply. Every advanced civilization eventually faces challenges that their specialized optimizations cannot handle. Natural disasters, technological failures, unexpected threats that require rapid adaptation and creative solutions. Humanity evolved specifically to thrive in such situations. She gestured to a holographic display that materialized in the center of the chamber. The Christech solar plague that devastated the hegemony's outer colonies 3 cycles ago. Your specialists required 18 months to develop a solution because the problem fell outside their established expertise. Humans could have developed countermeasures within weeks because we specialize in fighting unknown enemies. The display shifted to show other galactic crises from recent history. The Void pirate insurgency in the Outer Rim, the quantum cascade failure in the Andorian shipyards, the neural parasite outbreak on Kepler Station. All of these required solutions that transcended normal specialized knowledge. Elder Terminus's harmonics shifted to frequencies I had never heard before, indicating either profound interest or extreme concern. You propose to serve as the galaxy's emergency response force. We propose to serve as the galaxy's immune system, Admiral Chen corrected. Every stable biological system requires mechanisms to deal with unexpected threats. Galactic civilization has grown so specialized and optimized that it lacks the flexibility to handle novel challenges. The metaphor was disturbingly accurate. Galactic civilization had indeed become increasingly specialized over the millennia, with each species developing narrow expertise in specific fields. The Vraxians excelled at military engineering, the crystalline hegemony dominated energy manipulation, the Aquatic Federation led in biotechnology, and so forth. This specialization had created unprecedented prosperity and technological advancement, but it had also created systemic vulnerabilities. When problems arose that didn't fit existing categories, the galaxy's response was often slow and ineffective. However, Admiral Chen continued, we recognize that an immune system can become dangerous if it operates without proper constraints. We're willing to accept external oversight and regulation in exchange for the opportunity to contribute to galactic stability. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered this unprecedented proposal. Never before had a species voluntarily accepted limitations on their sovereignty in exchange for membership in galactic civilization. Ambassador Grixtel was the first to voice objections. This is obviously a deception. They seek to infiltrate our civilization by posing as protectors while learning our weaknesses. Admiral Chen nodded thoughtfully. Your suspicion is understandable and, frankly, intelligent. Trust must be earned through demonstrated actions rather than promises. I suggest a probationary period with clearly defined parameters. She outlined a framework that was both ambitious and carefully structured. Human expansion would be limited to specific sectors, but those sectors would serve as testing grounds for new technologies and social systems. Human military units would be integrated into joint response forces, providing galactic authorities with direct oversight of their capabilities. Most importantly, humanity would share their adaptive methodologies with other species, potentially strengthening the entire galactic community's ability to handle unforeseen challenges. The debate that followed lasted for cycles, with each major power arguing for modifications that would protect their interests while maximizing the benefits of human integration. The crystalline hegemony demanded access to human military innovations. The Botanical Collective insisted on environmental protection clauses. The Aquatic Federation required assurances about biological contamination. Through it all, Admiral Chen negotiated with a patience and flexibility that demonstrated exactly why humanity was so dangerous. She gave ground on minor issues while protecting core human interests, slowly building a consensus that satisfied most major concerns while positioning humanity exactly where they wanted to be. The final agreement, known as the Terran Accords, was unlike any previous treaty in galactic history. It recognized humanity as a provisional member of the Galactic Council while establishing unprecedented oversight mechanisms. Human expansion would be monitored by joint committees. Human military development would be subject to regular inspection, and human colonies would be required to maintain cultural exchange programs with established civilizations. In exchange, humanity gained access to galactic markets, advanced technologies, and the right to establish colonies in designated sectors. More significantly, they were granted the authority to respond to galactic emergencies with minimal bureaucratic constraints. The accords were signed amid great fanfare, with most delegates believing they had successfully contained the human threat while gaining access to useful capabilities. Elder Terminus, however, shared a private communication with me as the ceremony concluded. The young admiral has maneuvered her species into exactly the position they need to reshape galactic civilization, he observed. We have not contained humanity. We have given them official authorization to do what they intended to do anyway. His assessment proved prophetic. Within a single cycle of the Accord's implementation, humanity had demonstrated their true potential in ways that no one could have anticipated. The first test came when the Void Stalkers, a previously unknown species of energy-based entities, began systematically consuming inhabited star systems in the outer rim. These creatures existed partially outside normal spacetime, making them nearly impossible to detect or engage with conventional weapons. Traditional galactic response to such threats involved lengthy committee hearings, extensive research phases, and careful development of specialized countermeasures. The process typically required years of bureaucratic coordination before effective action could be taken. Humanity's response was characteristically direct. Within days of the first attack, human ships were in the affected region, engaging the entities with improvised weapons systems and experimental tactics. They lost several vessels in the initial encounters, but each failure provided data that informed increasingly effective strategies. More importantly, human forces began developing countermeasures in real time, sharing information across their fleet network, and adapting their approaches based on immediate battlefield feedback. Rather than waiting for perfect solutions, they implemented partial solutions immediately while continuously improving their effectiveness. The campaign against the Void Stalkers lasted only 6 months, ending with the complete elimination of the threat. Human forces had not only defeated entities that conventional wisdom said were invulnerable, but they had done so using principles that challenged fundamental assumptions about technological development and military strategy. The successful resolution of the Void Stalker crisis sent shockwaves through galactic civilization that went far beyond the immediate military victory. For the first time in millennia, a major threat had been neutralized through rapid adaptation rather than methodical analysis, and the implications were profound. Within cycles of the campaign's conclusion, every major power was quietly studying human tactical reports and attempting to reverse engineer their adaptive methodologies. What they discovered challenged fundamental assumptions about how advanced civilizations should operate. The crystalline hegemony's analysis was particularly revealing. Their top scientists had spent decades developing theoretical frameworks for combating energy-based entities, producing elegant mathematical models that predicted such creatures would be virtually indestructible. Human forces had defeated the Void Stalkers using crude energy-dampening fields and kinetic weapons guided by what appeared to be intuitive targeting algorithms. When hegemony researchers attempted to understand the human approach, they found something that defied their logical frameworks. Human tactics weren't based on comprehensive theoretical understanding, but rather on rapid experimental iteration. They had tested dozens of approaches simultaneously, discarding failures immediately while building upon partial successes. More disturbing was the realization that human forces had actually improved their effectiveness during combat itself. Traditional military doctrine called for extensive preparation, followed by careful execution of predetermined plans. Humans treated battle as a laboratory where hypotheses were tested under ultimate stress conditions. The psychological impact of this discovery rippled through established military hierarchies across the galaxy. If human methods were truly superior, then millennia of military science and strategic thinking had been fundamentally flawed. Ambassador Grixtel, whose own forces had been studying human techniques intensively since their humiliation in the Titan Nebula, requested a private meeting with Admiral Chen to discuss these implications. I was granted permission to observe, ostensibly to provide strategic analysis for Vraxian interests. The meeting took place aboard a neutral station in the Centauri system, with representatives from several major powers attending as observers. Grixtel arrived with a full honor guard and ceremonial weaponry, clearly intending to maintain some dignity despite his previous defeats. Admiral Chen arrived alone, carrying only a simple data pad and wearing her characteristic understated uniform. The contrast between their approaches was itself a demonstration of their fundamental differences. "Admiral," Grixtel began with barely controlled hostility, "your species' recent success against the Void Stalkers has raised questions about the effectiveness of traditional military doctrine. Some of my advisors suggest that we should abandon proven strategies in favor of your chaotic methods." Admiral Chen's response revealed another layer of human strategic thinking that I had not previously encountered. "Ambassador, you're operating under a false premise. Human tactics aren't chaotic, they're systematically adaptive. The difference is crucial." She activated her data pad, projecting a three-dimensional tactical analysis of the Void Stalker campaign. What I saw there was not the random experimentation I had assumed, but rather a sophisticated methodology for rapidly developing effective responses to unknown challenges. Every human military unit operates under what we call the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. We gather information about changing conditions, analyze its implications, make tactical decisions, and implement those decisions immediately. Then we repeat the cycle continuously. The projection showed human forces executing this cycle dozens of times during individual engagements, constantly refining their approaches based on real-time feedback. What appeared to be chaotic improvisation was actually a highly disciplined process of accelerated learning. Traditional galactic military doctrine emphasizes the first three phases while minimizing the fourth, Admiral Chen continued. You observe thoroughly, orient comprehensively, and decide carefully. But by the time you act, the conditions you observed may have changed completely. Grixtel's massive frame shifted uncomfortably. Rapid decision-making leads to tactical errors and unnecessary casualties. Careful planning saves lives. In stable environments, yes, Admiral Chen agreed. But most real combat situations are inherently unstable. The enemy adapts, technology fails, unexpected variables emerge. In such conditions, the ability to adapt quickly becomes more valuable than the ability to plan perfectly. She gestured to another section of the tactical display, showing comparative casualty rates from recent conflicts. The data was striking. Human forces had consistently lower losses per engagement despite facing superior enemies and using less advanced equipment. How is this possible? I found myself asking. Surely rapid adaptation must occasionally lead to catastrophic errors. Admiral Chen smiled, and for the first time I saw something predatory in that expression. It does. Humans fail frequently and spectacularly. The difference is that we fail fast, fail small, and learn immediately from those failures. The display showed examples of human tactical failures during the Void Stalker campaign. Ships destroyed by experimental weapons that malfunctioned, squads eliminated by tactics that proved ineffective, entire strategies abandoned after proving counterproductive. But what was remarkable was how quickly human forces incorporated these lessons into their ongoing operations. A weapon system that failed catastrophically in one engagement would be modified and redeployed successfully within hours. Tactics that proved ineffective against one type of enemy would be rapidly adapted for use against different opponents. Your species treats failure as a learning opportunity rather than a source of shame, I observed. Failure is the fastest way to eliminate ineffective approaches, Admiral Chen confirmed. If you're not failing regularly, you're not pushing hard enough against the boundaries of what's possible. This philosophy extended throughout human civilization in ways that gradually became apparent as more species began interacting with human colonies and institutions. Human research facilities operated under principles that most galactic scientists found deeply disturbing. Rather than pursuing single research tracks through careful theoretical development, human scientists would pursue multiple contradictory hypotheses simultaneously. They would test ideas that their own theoretical frameworks suggested were impossible, often discovering unexpected phenomena in the process. Their educational systems were equally chaotic by galactic standards. Human students were encouraged to question established knowledge, challenge their instructors, and develop their own theoretical frameworks. This approach produced graduates who were less knowledgeable than their galactic counterparts in specialized areas, but far more capable of creative problem-solving in novel situations. Most significantly, human society seemed designed to generate productive conflict at every level. Their political systems formalized disagreement through competitive elections and legislative debates. Their economic systems encouraged competition between organizations pursuing similar goals. Even their entertainment media celebrated characters who challenged established authority and conventional wisdom. The cumulative effect was a civilization that generated innovation as a byproduct of normal social functioning, rather than requiring special institutions and procedures to drive technological advancement. This reality became impossible to ignore when the second major crisis occurred less than a year after the Void Stalker incident. The quantum plague began as a minor anomaly in the vegan system, where experimental research stations had been investigating faster-than-light communication technologies. Initial reports described localized spacetime distortions that interfered with standard FTL drives but posed no immediate threat to inhabited areas. Within weeks, the distortions had spread throughout the entire system, making normal space travel impossible and effectively quarantining billions of sentient beings on various planets and stations. Worse, the phenomenon appeared to be expanding at an accelerating rate, threatening to eventually encompass the entire galactic core. Traditional response protocols called for the immediate establishment of a research consortium involving representatives from all major scientific institutions. The consortium would conduct comprehensive analysis of the phenomenon, develop theoretical models to explain its behavior, and propose carefully tested solutions. The preliminary analysis phase alone was projected to require 3 standard years. Humanity requested permission to deploy their own research teams to the affected system within days of the initial reports. When several council members objected that hasty intervention might exacerbate the problem, Admiral Chen's response demonstrated the difference between human and galactic approaches to crisis management. Every day we delay, the affected volume increases exponentially. By the time conventional research produces definitive answers, the phenomenon may be irreversibly entrenched. We need to start testing solutions immediately, even if our theoretical understanding is incomplete. The Council ultimately approved human intervention on the condition that their activities be closely monitored by galactic observers. What those observers witnessed changed their understanding of how scientific research could be conducted. Human research teams entered the affected system using modified ships designed to operate in disrupted spacetime. Rather than establishing safe research stations at the system's edge, they positioned themselves as close as possible to the most severe distortions. Their approach to understanding the phenomenon was characteristically direct. Instead of gathering data passively and analyzing it remotely, they conducted active experiments within the distorted regions themselves. They deliberately triggered controlled quantum effects to study the system's responses, gradually mapping the boundaries of the disturbance through direct interaction. More controversially, they began testing potential solutions before fully understanding the underlying mechanisms. When theoretical models suggested that certain quantum field configurations might stabilize spacetime, human researchers immediately deployed experimental devices to test these approaches. Most of these experiments failed, sometimes spectacularly. Several human ships were destroyed when their quantum stabilization attempts triggered cascade failures. Research stations were occasionally consumed by expanding distortion fields when containment protocols proved inadequate. But each failure provided data that informed increasingly sophisticated approaches. Within months, human teams had developed a comprehensive understanding of the phenomenon's behavior and had identified several potential stabilization techniques. The breakthrough came when human researchers realized that the quantum plague was not a natural phenomenon at all, but rather the uncontrolled manifestation of a successful experiment. The original research stations had achieved their goal of faster-than-light communication, but the technology had become self-sustaining and was gradually converting normal spacetime into a quantum communication medium. The solution was elegantly simple. Rather than trying to destroy the phenomenon, human teams developed methods to control and direct it. They essentially turned the quantum plague into a functional faster-than-light communication network that connected the entire vegan system instantaneously. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not only solved a galactic crisis, but had transformed it into a revolutionary technology that would benefit all spacefaring civilizations. The successful resolution of the quantum plague crisis established humanity's reputation as the galaxy's premier problem solvers, but it also revealed something far more significant about their long-term intentions. During the final phases of the project, I had the opportunity to observe human research teams working alongside scientists from other species. What I witnessed was not just technological collaboration, but a systematic effort to transfer human methodologies to other civilizations. Human researchers didn't simply share their solutions. They taught their colleagues how to develop similar solutions independently. They demonstrated their experimental techniques, explained their theoretical frameworks, and encouraged others to adopt their approaches to uncertainty and failure. Admiral Chen, when questioned about this apparent generosity, provided an answer that finally revealed humanity's true strategy for galactic integration. "We're not trying to dominate galactic civilization," she explained. "We're trying to strengthen it. A galaxy full of adaptive, innovative species is more interesting and more stable than a galaxy where one species holds all the advantages." The statement was both reassuring and terrifying. Humanity wasn't seeking to conquer or replace existing civilizations. They were seeking to transform them into something more like themselves. 5 years have passed since the quantum plague incident, and the galaxy I once knew no longer exists. The changes didn't come through conquest or catastrophe, but through something far more profound: voluntary transformation. The process began subtly, as human methodologies spread through normal academic and military exchanges. Species that had worked alongside human research teams during the recent crises found their own scientists adopting experimental approaches and adaptive thinking patterns. Military units that had observed human tactics began incorporating flexibility training and rapid decision-making protocols into their standard procedures. What started as simple knowledge transfer gradually became cultural evolution on a galactic scale. The crystalline hegemony was among the first to formally adopt human-inspired innovations. Their rigid hierarchical structure, which had served them well for millennia, was supplemented with what they called adaptive response protocols. Hegemony institutions began encouraging controlled failure and experimental thinking, leading to breakthrough discoveries in energy manipulation that surpassed their previous achievements. The Botanical Collective went even further, restructuring their entire civilization around principles of systematic adaptation. They recognized that their plant-based biology actually provided advantages for rapid evolutionary change, and they began consciously directing their species' development toward enhanced flexibility and innovation. Even the militaristic Clorthian Empire, humiliated by their early encounters with humanity, eventually embraced elements of human tactical philosophy. Ambassador Grixtel, who had once viewed human methods as chaotic weakness, now commanded fleets that operated with unprecedented flexibility and creative problem-solving capability. The transformation wasn't uniformly positive. Several species struggled to adapt human methodologies to their own cultural frameworks, leading to internal conflicts and social instability. The rigid mechanicals, whose entire civilization was based on perfect order and predetermined outcomes, experienced a catastrophic civil war when reform factions attempted to introduce adaptive principles. Some civilizations chose isolation rather than transformation, withdrawing from galactic affairs to preserve their traditional ways of life. The silent depths retreated to their underwater cities and severed all contact with the greater galaxy, declaring human influence to be a contamination of pure thought. But for every species that rejected change, 2 others embraced it enthusiastically. The galaxy was becoming more innovative, more adaptable, and more resilient with each passing cycle. The ultimate test of this new galactic civilization came when the Devourers returned. Elder Terminus had mentioned them during the early debates about humanity's integration into galactic affairs, the first of the transcendent species, who had disappeared from normal spacetime 37,000 years ago. Their return was as unexpected as it was catastrophic. The first signs appeared in the outer spiral, where entire star systems began experiencing reality distortions that defied all known physics. Space and time became fluid. Matter and energy transformed into configurations that violated fundamental laws of thermodynamics. Ships that entered the affected regions emerged with their crews speaking languages that had never existed and carrying technologies that couldn't function in normal spacetime. Traditional galactic response protocols were utterly inadequate for dealing with entities that operated beyond the boundaries of conventional reality. The Devourers had evolved far past the physical limitations that constrained other species, becoming something that was part energy pattern, part conscious thought, and part quantum probability. They weren't malicious in any sense that biological entities could understand. They were simply pursuing goals that required the conversion of normal spacetime into something more suited to their transcendent existence. The fact that this process would eliminate all current forms of life was apparently irrelevant to their calculations. Emergency council sessions were convened, but the usual committee structures and bureaucratic procedures proved helpless against a threat that didn't conform to any known categories. How do you negotiate with entities that exist partially outside of time? How do you develop countermeasures against technologies that operate through principles of reality manipulation? It was Admiral Chen, now promoted to Supreme Coordinator of Galactic Crisis Response, who proposed the only strategy that offered any hope of success. "We can't fight the Devourers using conventional methods," she announced to the emergency assembly. "They've transcended the limitations that our technologies and tactics are designed to overcome. But they're not omnipotent. They're simply operating from a different set of assumptions about what's possible." Her plan was characteristically audacious. Rather than trying to defeat the Devourers directly, she proposed that galactic civilization accelerate its own adaptive development to match their level of innovation. If the Devourers had transcended normal spacetime through millions of years of directed evolution, perhaps other species could achieve similar transcendence through rapid collaborative development. The Devourers succeeded because they were willing to abandon everything they had been in order to become something new, Admiral Chen explained. "We need to be willing to do the same thing, but faster and with greater coordination." The proposal sent shockwaves through the assembly. She was essentially suggesting that all galactic species voluntarily undergo radical transformation, abandoning their traditional identities in favor of something unprecedented. Elder Terminus's response was immediate and alarming. "What you propose is not evolution but revolution. The risk of civilization-wide collapse is enormous." "The risk of extinction is absolute," Admiral Chen replied calmly. "The Devourer's reality conversion is accelerating. At current rates, they'll reach the galactic core within 50 standard cycles. We can choose rapid transformation or inevitable destruction." The debate that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Species that had maintained their cultural identities for millennia were being asked to voluntarily abandon them in favor of untested experimental alternatives. The breakthrough came when human research teams demonstrated the first successful reality manipulation experiments. Working with volunteers from dozens of different species, they had developed techniques for temporarily transcending normal spacetime limitations. The process was dangerous and unpredictable. Many volunteers were lost in dimensional rifts or transformed into configurations of energy that could no longer maintain coherent consciousness. But those who survived emerged with capabilities that bordered on godlike. The ability to manipulate matter at the quantum level, to perceive multiple dimensional layers simultaneously, to communicate through direct consciousness transfer. More importantly, they retained their essential personalities and loyalties despite their radical transformation. Unlike the Devourers, who had apparently abandoned all connection to their original existence, the transcended volunteers maintained emotional and cultural ties to their species of origin. This discovery led to the development of what became known as the Collective Ascension Protocol. Rather than pursuing individual transcendence like the Devourers, galactic civilization would attempt coordinated transformation that preserved social bonds while enabling reality manipulation. The process required unprecedented cooperation between species that had barely been able to coordinate simple trade agreements a few years earlier. Every major civilization contributed their unique expertise: crystalline energy manipulation, botanical biological adaptation, Vraxian military engineering, human adaptive methodology, and dozens of others. The first large-scale test involved an entire star system, where volunteers from all participating species underwent simultaneous transformation. The results exceeded all optimistic projections. The transcended beings retained their individual identities while gaining collective capabilities that surpassed anything the Devourers had demonstrated. More significantly, they remained committed to protecting non-transcended life rather than viewing it as irrelevant to their purposes. Armed with proof that collaborative transcendence was possible, galactic civilization began the largest voluntary transformation in recorded history. Entire populations chose to undergo the process, accepting the risks in order to defend their way of life against an existential threat. The transformation wasn't uniform or universal. Many individuals and some entire species chose to remain in their original forms, trusting that the transcended could protect them from the devourer threat. This diversity of choice became one of the greatest strengths of the new galactic civilization. When the final confrontation with the devourers came, it wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. Two transcendent civilizations met in dimensional space and engaged in forms of conflict that involved the manipulation of reality itself. The details of that confrontation are impossible to communicate using normal language or concepts. Suffice it to say that the collaborative transcendence proved superior to individual evolution. The Devourers, for all their advanced capabilities, lacked the social coordination and adaptive flexibility that the Galactic Alliance had developed through human influence. The threat was ultimately resolved not through destruction, but through integration. The Devourers were convinced to abandon their reality conversion project in favor of joining the larger transcendent community. Their ancient knowledge was preserved and incorporated into the collective consciousness of galactic civilization. As I compile this final report, I exist simultaneously as the Vraxian military advisor I once was, and as something far more complex and capable. My individual consciousness remains intact, but I share thoughts and experiences with billions of other beings across thousands of species and multiple dimensional levels. The galaxy has become something unprecedented, a civilization that combines the stability of ancient wisdom with the adaptability of evolutionary innovation. We face challenges that would have terrified our ancestors, but we do so with capabilities that would seem godlike to previous generations. And at the center of this transformation, serving as coordinators and facilitators rather than rulers, are the humans. They achieved their goal of strengthening galactic civilization, but in ways that none of us could have imagined when Admiral Chen first addressed the Galactic Council. Humanity never sought to dominate the galaxy through force or manipulation. Instead, they infected us all with something far more powerful than any weapon: the desire to become more than we had been, to adapt and grow and transcend our limitations while preserving what made us valuable. They turned the entire galaxy into apex predators capable of hunting challenges that would have destroyed our ancestors. And in doing so, they ensured that the universe itself became a more interesting place. Looking back at my initial assessment of humanity as a pathetic species with soft pink skin, I realized that I completely misunderstood what I was observing. Their physical vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was evidence of their ultimate strength. Only a species confident in their intellectual and social capabilities would dare to explore the universe in such fragile bodies. They knew that their true advantages lay not in armor or claws, but in their ability to adapt, cooperate, and transform themselves and others in response to any challenge. Humanity taught the galaxy that evolution doesn't end with the development of intelligence. It begins there. And now we all hunt among the stars, seeking new challenges worthy of our enhanced capabilities, carrying forward the legacy of a species that showed us how to transcend our limitations while remaining true to what we are.